Orca Security is the new kid on the block when it comes to cloud security platform management. They boast their new side scanning, which allows you to plug in your cloud accounts at an account level or a subscription level, depending on which cloud environment you're using and which service you're using, and it will then scan it once every 24 hours. This side scanning technique allows you to grab all of the information out of your cloud accounts instead of just focusing on a single point. Legacy tools that are built for on-premise environments typically use scanning or credentials to understand the information that's going on. This has some limitations, and using the side scanning technique allows you to grab extra information without the extra configuration. This can be deployed across AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, and other cloud providers. What that means is that you have a single console where you can see all of your cloud configuration problems, malware, vulnerabilities, and all of the things that I'm going to touch on within this video. I want this video to be a single source of truth of information that you can refer to that would be as good as doing a POC or a POV of this product. Orca security dashboards allow you to have a level of customization that most other platforms don't allow you to have. It's really designed so that each different user of the organization, depending on what your role is, so you could be some sort of API management specialist, cloud security specialist, in security operations, you could build a custom dashboard for yourself so that you can fully understand what's going on in the cloud environment when you log in. Orca really tries to stay away from overcomplicating things like traditional types of dashboards and systems so that you don't get overwhelmed when you log in and instead see something really familiar that maybe you built yourself. Adding into the dashboard is really simple. The only thing you have to do is click on add a widget. Then you can choose based on the type of widget you want to select. It can be an attack path, a vulnerability. After you've chosen that, you can then select the size. So most widgets come in all three sizes, small, medium, and large. Then drag and drop into the dashboard itself. It's very easy. You can also remove anything from the dashboard, or you can choose one of the other presets on the dashboard. So if there's something else that you'd rather look at, or a dashboard that someone else has built, you can simply select that from the drop down and you can see the new information. I think that this actually enhances productivity because it allows teams to log in and see and understand everything that they need to know for their specific role. And it's also fully data driven. So there's nothing here that's going to waste your time. You put the things there that are going to mean something to you and to your role. And you can easily pivot from the dashboard information into something interesting if that's what you need to do. Searching for a specific asset or an asset type within your cloud estate is an essential part of a functioning cloud environment. It's also a compliance piece. If you look at the CIS framework, for example, the first control is an inventory of assets. The Orca platform is going to cover, as I've said before, your AWS, your Azure, your Google Cloud Platform, and more. You get a single portal where you can search through all of these things at once. You can view all of your asset information too, if you want to scroll a type of asset or a certain account. And we'll do a live preview of that now. Being able to search across all of these assets throughout all of your cloud environments is a super handy tool to have. I've been in situations before where I've been looking for a certain asset, whether that's a bucket or an EC2 instance, and I just simply can't find it in my cloud environment. So I can pivot to something like Orca and find it straight away. The search functions are awesome. You can do this at an asset level, an account level. So for example, if you're looking for something in AWS, we can go straight to the subscription that it's in, and we can see the subscription here, click on it, and it will search those assets. Then if you're looking for, let's say, a bucket in here, we can go data storage, buckets, and we can see that AWS S3 buckets are the only available option because Orca knows that your Azure storage, GCP storage doesn't exist in here. Once I've drilled down on those assets, I can see all of them, right? Now, they are scored too based on alerts and the risk that it poses to your environment. I'm going to talk about alerts in a minute, but if you wanted to know more about this asset, you can click on it and it will give you all of the information that you need. Now remember, because Orca is installed at that account level or at that subscription level, it grabs all of this information outside of your cloud account. So you get a really cool description, and the description is unique based on what's happening with that bucket. So to give you its name, tell you if it's publicly accessible, or any other cool information that might be related to this bucket. We get a graph too. So if you're wondering how it's connected to the environment, if it's connected to any EC2 instances, servers, whether it's publicly facing, which IAM roles are associated with it, Orca's pulling all of that information from your cloud accounts and showing it to you right here. There is additional information, depending on what type of asset there is, depends on what information you're going to see here. We can also see the risks associated with this asset. Like I said before, we're going to look at alerts soon, so don't worry about this too much, but we get lots of information about this. Network information, identity information. We can really drill down on any type of asset across the entire cloud environment, and it doesn't matter again where it is, Azure, AWS, GCP, Alibaba. It's a really awesome handy tool that you can use in your everyday life when you're looking for any type of cloud asset. It also, moving back to the compliance level, if you wanted to grab a quick export of this information, so your boss has said, how many buckets do we have in AWS, or how many databases are in our entire cloud environment? It's a really simple, easy way to go and do any of those compliance checks or find any important information that you may or may not know about at this stage. I know an inventory of assets doesn't seem very exciting, but I think that the level of compliance and visibility that you get from just simply being able to search for things by their name, by their account, by their cloud type, really gives you that extra level of handle over your cloud environment, and it adds a lot of that business value for the things that I spoke about, which are compliance levels, and just being able to see what you need to see very quickly. Orca's alert functions are pretty similar to most other platforms. It has its own way to sort of work out how alerts are generated. It tries to use some sort of context within your cloud environments to give you an idea about what's important to actually focus on, and it works these alerts out based on their criticality. So for example, let's imagine you had two servers that were exactly the same. If Orca can see that those two servers are slightly different in configuration, then it might alert you differently based on that configuration. A really simple example of this is if you have two servers, one server is online and one server is offline, and they have the same vulnerability, Orca's going to give them a slightly different risk score. Now, these risk scores on the screen might not be exactly what they would be given, but it gives you an idea about how it's trying to contextualize and think about the problems that it's facing. It can drill down deeper on this, so let's say you have a server that's publicly facing and also connected to a database, and it does have the same CVE as another server that's not connected to a database and not publicly facing. It's using all of that information as well to make that contextual decision about whether or not you should focus on this alert or not. The way that it focuses on alerts is by categorizing the alerts from critical all the way down to informational. In most environments, you will have a ton of informational alerts that you're welcome to go through, but the reality is that you should be focusing on the critical alerts first and then sort of moving down the chain. The cool thing about the 24-hour scans is that every 24 hours, if configuration changes are made, or there's updates to things like CVEs and new things are out, the level of visibility that you'll have over those alerts that are coming through will happen during that period of time. You can see the categories on the left side with the filters that Orca is looking at lots of different types of things in this environment, but I'm going to choose some low-hanging fruit here to talk about under the critical alerts. Now, one thing that a lot of environments do have that you may not know about are some malware, and I'm just going to choose one of these items of malware in an AWS environment to talk about real quick. So as the alert loads up, you'll find that all of the alerts sort of look really similar and follow the same sort of UI perspective that the rest of the platform does. So we get a really nice description about what's going on, and it's custom to each type of alert that's coming through, right? So we can see the location of where this piece of malware is, what type of machine it's on, what the name of the malware is, when the file was created, and as we scroll down, we get even more information. So those file paths, hash values, links to virus total, and everything that you would need, including being able to download the infected file to your machine to do some more investigation. On top of that, we have some remediation here. Now, depending on what type of alert there is, depends on the remediation. And they've even got a really nice plugin here with chat so that you can generate one as well. Every single alert that you see, you'll notice that the alert is in the middle of the screen or on the left side of the screen, and the asset is on the right side of the screen. So not only do you know information about what the alert's saying, but you can also see the asset on the right side. If you need to go ahead and verify this alert, snooze it, dismiss it, send it to a ticketing system, Orca has all of those types of integrations that you can go and use and plug into your current workflows so that it's not disruptive to what you already have. So if you wanted to chuck in Jira here, you can do that. If you wanted to send a notification to Slack for specific people, you can do that too. Send it to your Siemens SOC. There's a lot of different integrations that you can use on this platform, so you don't have to disrupt your already working workflows. You just simply throw Orca in the mix. So let's have a look at one of these workflows in real time. Yeah, I'm just going to quickly look at some data at risk, which is going to filter down all of our categories to what we need to look at. I'm going to choose the high category because we want to start at the top. And we see there's S3 bucket allows public access via bucket policies. Well, there's two AWS buckets here that we can look at. So if you're really trying to drill down on maybe PII information within the organization or having a look at things that are publicly facing, you can quickly go through any of these alerts and sort of drill down on any of those categories to find out more information. So if we skip through this, we can see that the summary says that you can download objects, upload objects, view objects in this bucket, which is publicly facing. So the workflow would be, you could choose an action to send this to a SIEM or a SOC or a ticketing system if it hasn't been sent already. But if you also wanted to go and remediate the asset, you can just use the Go to Asset button on the bottom right, which takes you to more information about what's happening here. Now, this is still in the Orca console, but I think it's really important that you have a look to see that Orca has a graph here to show you exactly what it's talking about. So we can see that there's a public internet here, and we can see that the bucket is facing the internet. If we wanted to go and remediate this in AWS, we can actually go straight to this asset by clicking the View in AWS button. It would be here, obviously, that you would go ahead and make any of the configuration changes that you need to ensure that this bucket isn't publicly facing, or maybe that it has the controls in place if it does need to be publicly facing, that only specific people can access this bucket. Having this level of context around your alerts is kind of like having an engineer looking over them and understanding them and prioritizing them as well. Being able to implement them into your workflows too, so that you can send it to that ticketing system that you guys have, or so that you can send it to your SOC, that's the most important part too. I think the best way to explain API security from Orca's perspective is to explain what it doesn't do. So a lot of the API solutions that are on the market at the moment ask you to send all of your APIs to some sort of a proxy or middleman where they can investigate the API calls and what's happening to that data as it's coming in and out of the system. Orca Security is talking about visibility more than anything and understanding where your API endpoints are. So I guess if you are setting up this proxy, then someone goes into your cloud account, spins up a new API, but doesn't send it through the proxy, you would never know that it's a security risk. What Orca is trying to do is, because it's scanning your cloud environment every 24 hours, or whenever you initiate a scan, it's going to pick up any of those API endpoints that you have spun up during that period of time. What that means is that it's going to find any of the APIs that you may not know about, that someone's misconfigured, or that might have been hanging around for a while that no one's keeping up to date with. Every time I've spun this up in a new cloud environment, there have been APIs that people don't know that they're there, or maybe they don't know that they're misconfigured. You're not going to go see an alert in the Orca UI that says something like, an API endpoint is being brute forced or unusual login or something like that, because it's just simply not looking at the endpoints from that perspective. Instead, we'll look at some of the alerts soon, but you're just going to see misconfigurations or visibility over these API endpoints. As we move through the different categories that Orca offers, attack paths, vulnerabilities, API endpoints, you're going to start seeing that the UI is pretty similar across all of them, but this dashboard is stagnant. We get important information like alert count and risk level, the top addresses based on HTTP operation count and response type, and we can see the top target compute assets. Other things like geolocations of these endpoints and that level of visibility is really important. As you scroll down past the dashboard, we get two more views. We get the assets view, so very similar to the inventory of assets view that we saw earlier, and an alerts view too, which is the same as the alerts view. The only difference is these views are designed to be specific to whatever category we're looking at. So in this one, obviously, they're all going to be alerts related to API security. The alerts here, as you can see, are related basically just to the visibility of these APIs and being able to understand and see where they are. If I flick back over to the Assets tab, we do get that list of domains and subdomains. where we can see that there's a really nice integration here with Cloudflare. So if you have a Cloudflare account, you can plug it into Orca and it will understand a lot more about your DNS and whatnot. But being able to view any of these assets in a graph format, I think is one of the more powerful ways to understand exactly what's happening here. So as Orca does a scan every 24 hours, it's going to pick up any more API endpoints. There's so many in this demo, please forgive me. But basically what's happening is from the top here, we can see that there's a domain, which has an endpoint. The endpoint is obviously related to a path, and then there's an operation here. So the good thing about this visibility is it's identifying any risk that you have. Let's say you have an API endpoint and you didn't know it was there and it's connected to PII or data or something that's important to you in the organization. You're going to have a level of visibility over what that looks like here. If we hover over any of these functions, we do get more information about them as well, including a screenshot, so you can see what's happening at exactly what's happening at that endpoint. If you're looking for a full package API solution from end to end, understanding where brute force attacks are coming from and bots are attacking you from, this is probably not the one for you. But if you have a really large cloud environment and you need some visibility over what's happening in there, Orca is a great platform to get across what's happening. Once again, because those 24-hour scans don't need your permission to go and find those API endpoints because they're installed at an account level or a subscription level. It's just going to go ahead and find them for you, and you can see them straight on the screen the next day. Alright, we're moving into one of my favorite categories that Orca has to offer. Now, other platforms have been creating attack paths in their own different way, I guess since Orca started doing it. I'm not sure if they were the first one, but it's the first one that I ever saw when I started working with them. What is an attack path? An attack path is basically a set of methods that an attacker can use to reach an objective. So, it's using its smarts around both security and the level of contextualization that we've seen previously with the alerting to say, okay, an attacker is going to move laterally through the network to reach this conclusion, which is usually something like PII or data. So if we had a public facing asset and that asset had a vulnerability that can be used to enter the network, then maybe that asset allows you to move laterally through the network to eventually get to a crown jewel or some PII. Orca is actually going to map that out for you and show you those steps and how it can be exploited to get there. Because of this, you don't have to do the hard work. It helps you think like an attacker because you can see the exact steps that they're going to take to exploit your own environment. And really focusing on attack paths and understanding where they are and how to prevent them, I think is one of the most powerful ways that you can utilize a tool like Orca and your cloud environment, just simply because it's so complex all of the time, especially if you have a large cloud environment. Vulnerabilities. It's a topic that everyone knows about and no one likes talking about. It's an annoying thing to do, it's time consuming, it's hard to work out what information there is, and there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of different vulnerabilities across all networks. Which ones do you prioritize? Which ones are important to do? Now, the difference between Orca and a lot of other security platforms that are looking at vulnerabilities is the collection of data and the interpretation of the data. Orca's collection of data is going to happen through the side scanning technique, which means that anything added to any of those accounts is going to be found in the next 24 hours and added into the platform's UI itself. The second part is data collection. Legacy systems typically use agents or scanning to find their data, which is starting to be an outdated process compared to the way Orca is finding its information. The second part as the prioritization of alerts, which is the part that I've been talking about with the attack paths and other components, which is the ability to have context about the environment. So if we go back to that example before about the alerts, where we have two machines, one of them's off, one of them's on, both have the same CVE, they're going to get rated differently, right? If you're complying with something like an Essential 8 and you need to find out what items are publicly facing and need to be fixed within the 24-hour period of a release, Orca has that information, so you can see any vulnerability with a fix that's publicly facing. You can break down that information. You can search for it, or you can find it pretty quickly in things like the dashboards. I find this very helpful with the prioritization of all of these alerts, what to fix first, what to fix next. I think a lot of teams struggle with analysis paralysis, but with Orca breaking down all of this information so quickly, it's very, very easy to find and then go and remediate. Cloud detection is probably the biggest differentiator between all of the other components of the Orca platform. And the reason for that is because it's actually trying to do something in real time. Orca typically is just looking at those 24-hour scans, but in this case, it's ingesting the CloudTrail logs to try and understand what's happening in almost a real-time fashion. So you can see here, there's an entity identification, then there's some modeling and an anomaly analyzer. So not only is it looking at not just misconfigurations, but also trying to use that behavioral aspect that's become very popular in the last few years. Another difference in the cloud detection space is the type of alerting that comes out of Orca itself. Instead of getting alerting that just simply tells you about misconfigurations, it's going to tell you things that are more in line with what's happening in the real-time aspect. So if we go back to the API scenario that we were talking about earlier, where it's just going to be looking at misconfigurations and what's happening from a visibility perspective, the biggest differentiator is cloud detection and response is going to be looking at those real-time type of alerts like brute forces and other kinds. I think that this is a really interesting aspect and a very good add-on to the Orca platform, and it provides a lot of value for anyone that wants some different kind of alerting than just configurations, vulnerabilities, and other type of visibility aspects to a cloud environment. One cool feature that cloud detection has on top of just being able to see alerts is being able to do what they call a forensic search, which is basically just being able to peer through the logs that are coming through the system so that you can drill down on the specific logs that generate the alerts. This is really cool from an analyst perspective if they want to not just jump into the AWS platform or another platform and look through logs all day. Orca is making that search function a little bit easier in a single platform. Orca's ability to look at data uses the same method that I've been talking about the whole time, the side scanning method. And what that allows it to do is break down data that one extra step that some other platforms can't do based on the way that it's installed, whether it's scanning, agents, whatever it is. So Orca can see data types. So it looks at lots of different data sources, whether that's a database in AWS or whether that's a bucket. It can look through Azure, GCP, and lots of other different types of data sources. It's also going to be looking for specific information. So any personal identifiable information, or maybe a social security number, for example, and you can customize these. So if you're in a region here, like in Australia, and you want to look for things like maybe a license number or a Medicare number, you can filter that customization in and find that specific set of data. As an example, you can look at some of the alerts around your PII or databases within the Orca platform, and you can see that it's taken out samples from the tables of your data structures. So what that means is that you don't have to sort of log in, get credentials to log into a database you might not have access to, and work out whether that information is legitimately something that you need to be concerned about, because Orca will give you a filtered version of that information in the UI yourself for that investigation to be completed. The dashboarding for data security is actually really good. The filtering that you can do and the information that it provides in a short amount of time is really handy. You can see how much information that you're storing, which is actually quite a surprise for a lot of people that plug this in. They don't realize how much data is actually in the cloud that they're using. You can also filter down based on the bucket type. So if there's an AWS bucket or a database or something that you want to filter down in, you can click on any of these items and they will automatically filter down for you so that you can see the data in a list down the bottom, and Orca is going to fill out that little inventory criteria for you. So if you want to drill down on that AWS bucket, it'll just fill that query in for you. I think the business value here from a data perspective is that Orca is going to show you all of the information that you need to know to go away and make a decision about something, whether it's, hey, that PII shouldn't be publicly facing, or we didn't know we had that information stored in that database, it doesn't comply, or maybe an asset is publicly facing that you didn't know about. I think data security is something that's super overlooked, especially in a cloud environment where it's so easy to misconfigure something, and using the Orca platform to find those things is very helpful. Look, everybody hates Active Directory and identity, but I don't think anyone expected what was happening with identity in the cloud to exactly happen. The level of permissions and accounts and users and groups and everything that started happening absolutely exploded when it came to cloud, and it became even more complicated than Active Directory itself. I am guessing that anyone that thought, oh, the next time someone builds some sort of identity platform, we'll fix all the problems that we have with Active Directory, but instead I think that we made some new ones. Orca is definitely identifying a lot of these problems, and it's actually really trying to help you remediate them. When you're beginning your cloud journey, typically, especially if you're in development, you're just thinking, hey, we need to get a product up and running. We need the systems to be online, and it's a real infrastructure mindset. It's not a security mindset. I totally get that, and I totally understand. But by the time security comes into play, there's probably a lot of things that you need to change to make sure that there's a minimum viable security product in place, right? I think where Orca is going to help here is identifying those major risks so you can tick them off yourself. And there's really low hanging fruit. So we have identities who didn't change their passwords in the last 90 days. We have the riskiest identity and access assets. And it even tries to give you a policy optimizer to help you move through your policies and change them so that your unused permissions and any other misconfigurations are identified and removed. One focus that Orca takes when we're talking about identity is attack paths. And the reason for that is because identity is used so often for lateral movement through the network that you need to focus on it to make sure people can't move from different items to different items. There are so many cloud accounts where for some reason everyone has access to every S3 bucket. For some reason everyone has access to every EC2 instance. And I know it's a pain as an administrator or a developer that, you need to log into something and you can't, and you have to make a change or you have to do something. But the reality is that if you can do it and your account's compromised, an attacker can do it as well. The focus on attack paths here is pretty prevalent when you can see that not only do we have assets alerts, but we also do have the attack paths related to identity here. Identity can be a can of worms, and it is someone's full-time job typically in an organization to do identity and privilege access management. With the Orca security tool, you can find these problems very quickly and remediate any of them that have to do with an attack path so that you can be more safe in the cloud. The Sonar Query function in Orca is the search function that you can use to drill down on assets and other things. It's pretty similar to the inventory of assets that we've looked at before, but there's a few different things that we can do to build these queries out and find different information. Originally, when the Sonar Query system was released, it was a little bit clunky and a little bit funny to use. The reason for that is because it is its own query system, which means you have to go away and learn the query system, figure out what exactly you're searching for, and get the results. Now, the really cool thing is because you can pretty much search for any type of metadata within the Sonar Query system that Orca is gathering from doing its side scanning and other methods, you could drill down on information really, really well. You may have noticed when we were looking at some alerts earlier within this presentation that the Sonar Queries actually exist in the alerts too. So if you're interested in modeling a new type of alert or new type of query that you've already seen in the Orca UI, you can just go ahead and copy one of those queries and model against that. Because the Sonar Queries are a little bit complicated, there was a next generation of this querying system that looks like that inventory of assets, where you can basically just use a drop-down box to filter in and out of things that you want to. So whether that's a bucket or a compute resource or an identity, you can go ahead and use that filtering system. Recently, there has been more of an update to make this even more easy so that you don't have to do the filtering yourself. You simply just come up with a query and Orca will use an AI generated filter to filter down on it. So you could be looking for all virtual machines that are publicly facing, maybe with some PII, or you could create another query and say, I want to see all containers with vulnerabilities, and it will use those phrases and go and build the query for you so you don't have to do that. Some other cool functionality that you see here is that whatever query that you create, you can actually create an alert for it so that it does show up in the alerting system. Even better, you can actually create a dashboard item. So the customizable dashboard items that we saw at the beginning, you can add custom ones in based on the queries that you create. So if you have a compliance method or you have a specific role, like we spoke about in the beginning of the video, that you want someone to see as soon as they log in, some information, you can go ahead and create that query, create a widget, customize it a little bit so that it looks like the way you want it to look, and then go ahead and implement it in your dashboard. I've had customers that have found it really hard to find things within their cloud environment. We can quickly go into Discovery after it's plugged into your accounts and do a quick search, especially using the new AI function, and bam, you find it in 10 seconds. It's a really, really easy tool to use, and I think that it has a lot of value for a lot of customers. Shift left when it comes to Orca is a big topic. Not because it's complicated, but just because there's so much stuff in here, and it does become a little bit more technical than just being able to, look at a vulnerability and then go ahead and remediate. It does go that extra level, and the people that have implemented this, in my experience, actually becomes an ingrained, important part of their workflow. So what's happening in this case? Basically what you do is you plug in your code repositories wherever they're hosted, if that's Git or GitLab, there's a few others. Then Orca goes through the code to determine if there's any vulnerabilities that are going to be deployed into production environments, any problems with any of the code, whether there's encryption or whether there's network access. It has a series of different things that it's going to look for. And it does this based on policies. So you can have a set of policies that look at your code security and your image security. And based on those policies, Orca is going to go ahead and tell you that there's a problem. Policies are completely configurable. So if you don't want to comply to a specific policy that Orca has put in place previously, you can go ahead and you can either change that policy as a customization, or you can get rid of it altogether. The reality is that you might be accepting some risk in your environment, and we don't want Orca turning around every single day and telling you that something's wrong, or you should face your attention to a certain thing when it's not as important as it should be. Orca provides this functionality sort of in two different aspects. One of them is in the UI, and someone like a security engineer or a DevSecOps engineer would be looking in the UI to see these things. But if you're actually an engineer, you might be using the CLI version that goes through the repositories in real time and actually checks if things do pass or fail before they get through to the next stage. So you can really ingrain this into your DevOps pipeline to make sure that it is the check before it does go into production, or before you do submit it to a new branch or similar. Compliance is really short and sweet. It's really similar from a UI perspective as all of the other parts of Orca, where you can filter down based on provider and accounts. It's one of the most powerful things that you can get in a platform like this, looking at all your information, because you can simply plug in a benchmark or any type of level of compliance, and you'll be able to quickly see all of the controls and whether they've passed or failed, and drill down on each sub-control that's based on whatever type of compliance level you're looking for. You can browse through these frameworks. There's lots of them. Orca has their own custom ones. You can make your own custom ones. All of the popular ones are there. So if you're a CIS place or a NIST organization, or you need to PCI compliance, or pretty much anything that you want is in this platform. As an example, we're going to drill down really quickly on the Essential 8. I know that in this platform, Essential 8 maturity level 3 is already in place. So let's go ahead and hit maturity level 2 and just see how quickly Orca is going to apply that to the whole organization and get the results for us. So there's no more beating around the bush and having problems calculating all of these things and hiring expensive consultants to come in and tell you all of the information that Orca is going to tell you about your cloud environment. I really wish I had more to say about compliance. I think it's a really powerful tool, and I haven't seen any other platform do it quite as quickly as what Orca's doing. If you have this in place and you have reports to build and people to satisfy from a compliance level, it's pretty awesome. Well, that's it. That's everything that I think is important to go through in the Orca platform. Now, there are other features that we could use and native integrations that I think are really cool that the platform has to offer. We're not going to go through them in this video, but if you are interested in them, please comment below if you want to see more about the platform itself. But I think you've seen everything you need to see here today to get the real value about what Orca is. Just a final sign off of the key value points that I really like about Orca is the installation time is less than half an hour, depending on how many cloud accounts you have. So your time to value is basically a day. If you have things that you think that are wrong in your cloud environment, you can find out about them within about 24 hours and then start remediating them. It's super important that once you have a platform like Orca, that you ingrain a system like this into whatever functionality you have as an organization. Whether that's a ticketing system, whether that's a CI/CD pipeline, whether that's a vulnerability management team that needs to use this, whatever it is and whatever your use case is, it's important that you get people on board using the platform and understanding really how it works and how it thinks about things. Thank you for watching.